computer. Okay, so for those who are following along at home, welcome. So today we're going to cover CRUD, REST, and HTTP, and then hopefully that won't take up the whole hour. Then we'll also review. So I think I'm at minimum viable product. We'll see how much time we've got, but I think I'm at a point where I don't know if you saw. Did you see the conversation in Slack about deploying it to AWS?
I saw where he said, yeah, you might as well do it. And you said permissions, I think. And,
yeah, I said, yeah, I mean, I'm up for it. I mean, Heroku is the easiest way to do it, but I don't mind the learning experience. But yeah. I mean, somebody's got to send me some credentials, and I don't even know what. I mean, I suspect I wouldn't be surprised. The Vetsu Code seems pretty good about getting free access to all these various services. So I'm assuming maybe we have an AWS account, so we've got some free stuff. So I'm happy to, but I haven't heard anything. So I'm just like I say, I think I'm gonna. I think that's going to be next on my list is to go ahead and deploy it to Heroku, and if we want to deploy it somewhere else later, fine. But I just want to get it out there sooner rather than later to
get something out
Eddie's going to really be. I mean, really, he's the one that's going to use it. So really, it's going to be his call on whether it's if he needs something, if he wants more. I feel like we can do whatever he needs. We just need to know what he wants. But I feel like all the basic stuff is there. So. All righty, can you see my screen okay?
I can, yes, sir.
Okay. All righty, so we will jump right in. Okay, so again, for those who are maybe following us on YouTube, this is section 5 of the LinkedIn Learning, and he covers HTTP, REST, curl, all that good stuff. So I'm going to do my best here. I'm not an expert, and this is, this is one of those weird things. It's very much a conceptual. It's very much a conceptual model for web applications, CRUD actions and how they relate to database, how they interact with the database. And that's really, in some ways, that's really all sort of CRUD and REST is. I mean, HTTP is the technical. We'll talk about that. HTTP is the technical implementation of it. But REST and CRUD are really just models and ways of thinking about, again, this interaction of web applications and how they interact with the database. So it's this nebulous thing, and the implementation can be different too. History-wise, like Rails, the first Rails, if you go back, there was a white paper, and I can't remember the dude's name. We may be approaching 15 or 20 years now, but the concept of REST was first done by, I think this is a PhD, a computer science PhD somewhere, who wrote a paper on REST, and REST is representational state transfer. And again, it was just a model for thinking about interactions with the database, and this and I'm assuming HTTP is a part of that white paper too. So but there is a, from a technical standpoint, if you really want to, if you want to go back and dig that up and read it, you can read about that. But anyway, the LinkedIn Learning, he does a good job. I'm going to do my best to encapsulate that. Again, I know it good at a surface level, but certainly, Greg, feel free to ask questions and help me flesh this out. But I also say that to say that I have this surface knowledge of it, but as soon as you start to dig too deep and ask too many questions, I usually dig myself into a hole pretty quick. But anyway, this was a good review for me, and it's helpful for me to do stuff like this just to sort of encapsulate your thoughts, about what it is. So certainly feel free to jump in with questions anytime.
Copy.
Okay. All righty. So let's start off with CRUD. So we should be familiar with the term CRUD when we talk about CRUD. That's an acronym for create, read, update, and delete. And it really refers to a model for how we think about web applications and how they interface with the database. And that's really the key part, right? When we think about JavaScript and sort of JavaScripty frameworks, the database really we're talking about UI there, and so the database is not necessarily a part of that, right? Generally, a lot of stuff you're doing in a JavaScript world is really just in memory. You're not necessarily, but this, when you add the database part and this idea of sort of static data being saved somewhere, then that's when we're talking about the CRUD part of this. And so again, it's just a model or a way of thinking about how web applications interface with the database. And it gives us a formal, structured way to think about these database operations. And so again, when we talk about CRUD, we've got these 4 standard actions: create, read, update, and delete. And so Rails very much focuses around that CRUD model. When we look at controllers, when we look at sort of the default controllers in Rails, and the example, when I say default, I mean the sort of 7 actions that you get out of the box when you use scaffolding with Rails. They're focused around those four main actions. So each of those elements of CRUD has 2 actions that go along with it. So let's look at this little, again, I copied this little form from or picture from the LinkedIn learning LinkedIn learning lesson. So here's our create, read, update, and delete. So create has new and create, and then you can see a description here. I won't reread all of those. And then notice the URL example that they've got there. Okay. Read has index and show. Update has edit and update. And delete has delete and destroy. And just so let's look at, just so we sort of know what we're talking about here, let's look at a controller. Let's see, I use scaffolding for the Cohorts Controller. And so we're looking at the Vetsu Code app here. Here we've got just to give you all a sense of the models and the structure there. We've got a users model. Obviously, when people sign up for the app, we're using that user model to keep track of the users and also for authentication. But we've also got this cohorts model. When the whole idea behind Vetsu Code is we train vets to do web development and coding, but we have classes or what we call cohorts that come through. So each student or each recruit is going to be a part of a cohort. So I use scaffolding, the sort of default scaffolding, to create the cohorts model. So we also have an accompanying cohorts controller here. And so here are our 7, let's see, 7 or 8. Yeah, this is, I think, our 7 default actions here. So index, show, new, edit, create, and then update and destroy. And of course, the destroy method here takes care of the delete function. So again, these are, now again, we could call these, and that's why I say this is a model for thinking about CRUD, is really a model for thinking about how we want to do it, because we could sort of call these anything we want, and we can use HTTP methods to sort of fudge and do different things. So the implementation, that's why I sort of stress that, the model for what it looks like in the implementation can be 2 different things. So we sort of need to keep those things separate in our mind. So again, create has the new and create actions. Read has index and show. Update has edit and update, and then delete has delete and destroy. And again, these actions here are going to sort of correlate to the actions that we see here. And again, along with those, the URL, the example URL here is going to is emblematic or descriptive of what that particular process does, right? And so we'll talk about the IDs here in a second, but notice some of these are sort of, some of these are static, I guess you'd say, subjects new. So in this case, the example that the LinkedIn Learning course uses, they've got pages, they're using a blog post. You think about a blog post for the example application they're using, and they've got pages, but then they've also got a subjects model. So that's sort of what they're mimicking here. But notice some of these are static, and then notice some of these had this colon ID here. So those are specific actions that are that are affecting resources or database records, and that's what that ID, that's what that colon ID does. Rather than seeing colon ID in the actual URL, you might see /1 or /50 or /387, depending on what the record number or ID was. And then also notice that create, update, and delete, each of these actions display a form and then process the form, and then that's as opposed to the read action just has index and shows. So both of those are just sort of static pages that are showing you information or resources. The other two generally give you a form and then a way to process or submit that form, and then that sort of makes sense when you think about creating a record, updating a record, or deleting a record. You're going to be doing it. Obviously, you're doing that on a specific record or you're doing that on a specific resource or record. Okay, so that's sort of that whole piece. So again, thinking about the URL and the URL structure here too, clear, well-structured URLs easily allows us to see what the object, see what the object is, see what is the object we are working with and what is the action we are performing on it. Okay, so in this case, the object is going to be this ID field that I talked about. So that's the specific record. But then, of course, we can also see, and again, we're looking at this example /subject. So we know this is the subject we're dealing with. The ID tells us the specific subject we're dealing with, and then whether it's show, edit, update, it tells us the specific action that we're going to execute or that we're going to do on that that specific object. Okay, easily. Okay, so this is a and I just sort of made some highlights and put in bold here some sort of key points. This is a resources oriented approach. Okay, the resource is the object we are performing actions on, and we're performing actions on that resource. Okay, so again, the object is going to be the ID here. That's the specific object we're going to be working with, and then again, the URL tells us the action, the action that we're going to be performing on that specific resource. Okay, couple points here. Separate controllers. So again, for each model, you've got a separate controller, and each one of those controllers has these actions for that specific controller and for that specific model. So again, there's generally a one-to-one correlation between the controller and the model, which reflects a database table. Okay, and again, the examples he uses here is the subjects or the subjects controller, but again, subjects controller, pages controller. Again, in our case with the Vets Who Code app, we've got right now, I think the users and the cohorts model is the only thing we've got. But again, you've got a relationship there. You know, a user belongs to a specific cohort, and a cohort has many users that are associated with it. We'll see some interesting, we'll see some sort of URL and some HTTP tricks and things that I've done to be able to look at users associated with a cohort when we're done. And then also often, as I said, one controller per model, and then uses plural names. So again, this is this plural versus singular thing, that controllers are generally plural and models are singular. And that can cause you some pain. I've done it before where I've sort of screwed that up, and like it still works, but it's you need to stick to that, even though I think it can work outside of, if you mess up the whether it's single or plural, it still works, but you should really stick to it, because again, Rails has a way of doing things, so it can throw other folks off. Well, it can even throw you off, even though you're the one that did it. I think that's what I ran into, is I did it and I was like, wait, is this right? So when you go to call different paths and things, it can really cause you some pain. So again, just follow that rule of when you generate your controllers, the controllers should be plural, models or singular. And again, if you use scaffolding to do that, scaffolding will take care of it for you. Go ahead.
Will that present also like attribute errors when you're poking around in the database?
So it's not not at the database level, but at the application level, it can, okay, right? Because the Rails are just making the calls to the database. So it's not going to screw anything up necessarily in the database, but some of the methods that Rails is going to want to use, again, it'll adjust for it and it'll allow you to do it, but you need to use the right method name when you make those calls, depending on whether you've used singular or plural. But again, you need to get it right, because if it's wrong, then it's going to screw you up, and it'll probably definitely screw other folks up too when they go to use those methods. Okay. So let's talk about REST. So REST, as we said earlier, is representational state transfer, and it performs state transformations on resources. Okay, that is a mouthful, so let's take that apart. So first, let's talk about state. You may or may have not heard of state before, but Rails was the first place I really heard about state. I didn't, at least previous to dealing with Rails, I didn't hear much about state. But when we talk about state, you'll often hear that Rails is stateless. And depending on the language of the framework you're using, you'll hear this idea of stateful versus stateless. So this was a quote I found on, I put a link for it here in case anybody else, just to give proper attribution in case anybody runs across it on Medium. But REST maintains that all application state should be kept on the client. This is what is meant by statelessness. Not that there is no state within the application, but that each request can stand on its own. The client server session itself maintains no state. And what I like to think about this, you often run it, you'll see it in PHP a lot, where if you use the back button or something like that, it can throw the request off and it can sort of screw up the state, or it can screw up the data in the database. Basically, well, that never happens with Rails, because again, Rails is stateless. So each request stands on its own. It doesn't rely on sessions or cookies or anything like that to have the data in the correct state. So when we talk about stateful versus stateless, and Rails being a stateless framework, that's sort of what we're talking about there. And again, it's sort of a nebulous concept. You don't necessarily need to understand that at a real low level, but just know that that's sort of the way Rails works.
How does that like affect the speed of the app? Right?
That's a good question. I don't know that it's my sense is it's not going to have any effect. I mean, the request is not,
negligible.
When we talk about that request response cycle, I don't know that the data being passed along is more, or is any more, is greater or smaller, depending on whether it's stateful or stateless. I think it's more of an implementation kind of thing. And from a data integrity, I guess, might be the right way. It's not a security issue necessarily, but more of a data integrity issue. That again, each request sort of stands on its own. Okay. Okay, let's talk about HTTP. So we've sort of talked about CRUD, we've talked about REST some. Let's talk about HTTP, sort of the other component here, the other moving part. And it's the more sort of standardized part. Again, when we, at least in my mind, when I think of CRUD and REST, it's more this sort of, it's a bit more nebulous, and it's just a model or way of thinking about things. HTTP is the actual boots on the ground, the actual protocol and methods that you're going to use to implement the concepts that CRUD and REST give you. So HTTP is a generic and stateless protocol which can be used for other purposes, as well as using extensions of its requests, methods, error codes, and headers. Basically, HTTP is a TCP/IP based communications protocol that is used to deliver data on the web. And we talk about data, it can really, you know, all the things that we think of that web pages do: HTML, files, images, video, queries, all those things HTTP takes care of. And I mean, generally when we talk about our, you know, when we talk about our URLs and web address, you're seeing the implementation of HTTP, the HTTP there. And then we'll look at on the Rails side, you know, we're always talking about looking at the console. And when we're in the development environment, we're making requests and doing things. There's all kinds of great information. That's one of the great things about Rails is all the information you get in the development console anytime you make a request or there's a response, because you can really go look at the specific HTTP you know, calls and methods that are being used there. Okay, so REST and HTTP verbs. So when we talk about HTTP verbs, generally what we're talking about is get, post, patch, and delete. Okay, so generally when we talk about get, we're talking about retrieving. We're talking about retrieving items or getting things from the web. So generally these are links. You're going to click on some link and then you're going to get a sort of a static response back. Okay. Post request, we're talking about generally talking about creating a new resource. So again, generally that's a form. You know, when we think about a standard form that you're going to fill out and hit the submit button, you're usually, when you hit that submit button, then an HTTP post is made and you're generally sending data out to some server. And it's, again, generally it's going to be saved to a database somewhere, saved and then usually processed in some way. Okay. Patch is updating an existing resource. So again, we think about a form for that. And again, you can think about where you think about a page where you're going to be editing your profile or editing some data, some existing data that's not already there. Again, that we think about a patch HTTP verb there. And then delete is the last one. So deleting an existing resource, and generally those can be either links or forms. So how do these HTTP verbs line up against their CRUD counterparts? So again, I like to think about this. The HTTP is the actual methods you're using to sort of implement this idea of CRUD and REST. So the way those line up with one another looks something like this. So again, these are our sort of default actions that Rails gives us in index, show, new, create, all those things. So here's the HTTP verbs that line up with each of those. And if you think about it, if you just sort of go through these, you know, it sort of makes sense. Index, show, new, generally that's a get request, right? If you're looking at an index page, let's see, let's load up our app here. So let's put this here, and then, so this is our Recruit Tracker app. I'm logged in as an admin right now, so I can look at the cohorts here. So again, when we talk about index pages, this slash, so if you look at it again, if you look at the URL here, slash cohorts is going to give us a list of all cohorts that are in the database, right? So that's this index action will be our first one here. It's going to be a get request. Again, we're just showing all items that are in the database for that particular model. Again, in this case, it's the cohorts. Show, and again here we're going to be showing, we're going to be getting all items or resources that have a particular ID. So in this case, I can click the show model, and I'm looking at this specific noobs, noobs cohort, and also notice our URL up here. When we're looking at the index, it was just slash cohorts. When we're actually looking at a specific cohort, it's going to be /1. Now again, in this case, we've only got a single cohort here, but we can imagine a scenario where we've got 50, 100 a million records, you're going to be showing the ID is going to be the last thing, or the ID is going to be appended to the end of the URL. Okay. New, again, show form, that's just going to be /new. So I could do new cohort here. Notice we've got cohort /new. And again, this is a GET request. We're not submitting anything yet. So we're just loading up this form. So we're just getting this form so we can load it up. And then the create is the actual post request, right? When we hit, so again, this new action is going to load this page. We could fill this, we could fill this data in, hit the create cohort button. That's going to actually do that post request that actually sends the request off to fill up the database, or to populate the database with that new record. Edit. Again, so we could do back, we can choose the edit function here. And again, notice our model in this case is going to be the cohort model. We've got the ID of the specific cohort that we're going to edit. And then we've got the action that we're going to do on the end. And yeah, we'll look at that, but in fact, I'll click on that. Greg, you just shared this with me. So right, we can also do routes here, and I need to use this more. I'm big on, and I just always have done it this way, but I'll use Rails routes inside the console, and you can get the same thing.
That's how I was doing it. But when I'm bouncing back and forth between the console and the browser,
this is definitely a better way.
And
I mean, the other thing to do,
yeah.
And I mean, for me, it's just I've been using Rails since 2.0, I think is when I first started using it, and we didn't really have any of this, so I was used to doing it at the current console. But no, this is a great way to do it. And I mean, the other thing is you can also search here too, which the way I would do it is if I just wanted to look at all the user routes, I would do pipe grep users, and then that'll give you just the user routes. Let me So but anyway, and then that's a real handy way to, again, you can, and we'll talk about this path. We'll talk about this helper method over here in a second. But yeah, here you can see the HTTP verb. You can see what the URL is, and then you can see the associated controller and action that is associated with that. Okay. All right, and the rest, I won't go through the rest of these, but I think you sort of get the idea of this idea of the HTTP method, the URL string, what the structure is like. And again, Rails is really the first one to do this. If you look at all modern frameworks now, whether they're UI sort of JavaScript focused or just in general, this URL pattern, URL structure is pretty common among among most web frameworks. So Rails gives you these using resourceful routes, and you can do this using the resources keyword in the routes.rb file. So we'll go to routes.rb, and so when you use scaffolding, again, by default, Rails will use this resources keyword in the routes file, and that gives you those 7 routes, those 7 default routes. It auto magically gives you those rather than having to specifically code them up. Now you can see I've got some specific. So for instance, for change profile status, this was a new inside the users controller. Let's see, yeah, users controllers here, and we can look at the functionality of this in a second. But if a user changes their profile, I've got the standard default routes here, but there was a new method, there was a new action that I wanted to create for this controller, so I added this change profile status, and then I had I created an accompanying route that would go along with that. So that's what this change profile status. Now in this case, it's a post request, and in fact we'll look at it here. If I go to current recruits, so I can do review change status, and then I can change their status here. Let's say I'm gonna put it under review. So this is the email that gets sent. So just, yeah, I don't know if you've seen this, Greg, but I added, this is a pretty cool gem. It's called letter.
No, yeah, that's awesome.
It's called letter opener. And essentially it just opens, it allows you to preview any email that's sent. You just set this up in the development environment. So in your development environment, you're not worried about emails getting sent.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it allows you to preview the email that gets sent. And then if we go back here, still working on I want to get the flash messages to work, but you can see it changed the status here. And then if I go back to recruit, notice it changed it to under review here. But again, I really wanted to look at the request that was made. Let's go back. Let's do this. Let's do that again so we can actually see what. So I'm going to change. So we're going to change it from under review to rejected. And now if we immediately go here and look, so this is the email that was actually sent. But if we go here, we can see we made a post request. There's our post request to / change profile status, and then this is for the specific for the resource for the user for the resource or object two. So that's the user with an ID of 2. And again, we can see here the actual action or method that's being called inside the user's controller, change profile status, and then in this case we're just updating the profile status to let's see, changing the profile status to, we should see it here, 4. Yeah, in this case, yeah, I think profile status is an enum. So all we see is the number here, but I think it's actually rejected. We can see in the email it's rejected. So those are all kind of, I mean, that's a good example, just creating a specific action that's going to do a specific thing inside the controller for you. That's a good example of creating the action inside the controller, creating the specific route that's associated with it, and then also specifying the HTTP verb. In this case, it's a post request that's associated with that specific action.
Yeah, that's slick, man.
Yeah. And then I've got to just note to look at the cohorts example, and then notice I use the member. So you can use member, and the other one. Do I have an example of the other one here? Yeah, there's a member action, and then collection, I think, is the other one. But I wanted to make note of that. So, and Greg, you know this, for those following along at home. Again, the association between, in fact, let's do this. Let's close other tabs. So the association between a user and a cohort. At cohort.rb. So yeah, cohort has many users. User belongs to a cohort. And what that looks like inside the app is, again, we're going to have various cohorts here, and users can be associated with cohorts. But notice I've got this show recruits link. And again, if we had another cohort here, in fact, let's create another one. Let's do summer 2021. Let's say it starts in, June, and let's say it ends in August, and summer cohort. We could put whatever we wanted there. Let's go ahead and set this one as active. Let's see if that'd be a good test to see if it actually works. So yeah, it does work.
Yeah.
So again, just so folks know, we can only have one active cohort at a time, and so another cohort is already active. Only one cohort may be active at a time. So we'll make this inactive. We'll click OK. So let's go back to our cohorts. So if I wanted to set this one as active, I could make the noobs cohort false. In fact, let's do it and see if it works. So I'm going to update cohort back, both false, and then I should be able to make this one active. Okay, that seemed to work. It's true. So if I go to current recruits now, not there. So current recruits shows all of shows recruits that are part of the active cohort. In fact, I should probably have some notes on that somewhere so folks see it. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to point out is this idea of getting this relationship. So in this case, we've got this relationship that users are part of a cohort, and we're going to want to look at all users or recruits. We'll call them. In this case, we're going to want to look at any recruits that are specific recruits that are associated with a given cohort. So summer 2021 does not have any recruits. So if we look at that, but if we look at the noobs cohort, we should have one, or well, we've got two. And in fact, the admin user is two. But anyway, notice the URL structure, which is interesting here, right? / cohorts 1. So this is saying we're looking at the cohort that has the database ID of 1, and we're getting all of the users that are associated with that. Okay, let's look at the web request in the server screen here and see what we're seeing when we get that. So here's our get request. We're calling that same URL we just looked at. So now in this case, this is being processed by the cohorts controller and then the user's action within the cohorts controller. And then before we go, we'll go look at that in a second. Let's look at what the actual query is. So select cohorts from cohorts where cohorts is 1. Yeah, okay, right. And then select users, and then select the users from that given cohort. In fact, okay, yeah, here's actually the query I want. Although that's a good instructive lesson that those two queries are being done. But let's look at this one first. So here, select users from users where users.cohort is equal to, in this case, 1. Okay, so that says select all users where cohort is 1. Although this is a good lesson. This single web request, right? When we just refresh this page, this single web request is actually making 3 queries, right? We're selecting all cohorts, we're selecting all users, and then we're actually teasing out, the users that belong to cohort with an ID of 1. So just sort of keep that in mind. I mean, in this case, it's trivial because we've got 2 cohorts and we've got 2 users. But again, think about a Google or an eBay or a Facebook where, I've got 255. I've got 255 friends, so I'm selecting. When you go to view my profile, we're going to select user with my ID, and then we're also selecting all of our friends that are associated with that. So you can see sort of how from just a server load standpoint and that kind of stuff, how these queries like this can add up pretty quickly.
Yeah, pretty quick.
Yeah. So the other thing let's look at is that again, this is being called from the cohorts controller and then the user's action within the cohorts controller. So let's go. Let's look at that. So cohorts controller, and then here's our users action here. So this is actually pretty underwhelming, right? I'm just calling cohorts dot at cohort dot users. The reason that I'm able to do this is because of this. Let me slide this over here. Is really because of this has many and belongs to association. And let's look at it in the console.
So I got a question for you. I'm bumping into an error on a different app that I'm working on, and I'm getting a missing attribute error after I've tried to do the has many and belongs to. And I'm wondering why I'm getting that error. And maybe it's, for the sake of this, I mean, it's interesting that we're talking about it now and I'm still getting the same issue, but I'm just wondering.
First thing I would think about is in the controller, in the underscore params part. Lots of times if you forget to add the reference inside there. So I would check your controller, because let me see.
Okay, thanks.
Let me look at the user's controller.
Well, so I was trying to do it all through Rails G migration, and I was adding and removing and, you know,
So
working
that's
it
one
out from
part of it,
there.
right?
It's just like,
Right, you've got to have the foreign key. You got to have the foreign key association there. Like in this case, a user has a cohort. So, well, see, in this case, I didn't have to add. I would have expected to see cohort ID here, but you don't need that. I mean, you need it from a migration standpoint. You need it in a migration file so you can actually create the field. But actually, in the params, you don't need that as a part of the. You don't need that as a part of the user params.
and it's not up top. It's not one of those before notes up top there.
No, because I mean, all it you do run set. Yeah, you run set user, but that's really the only thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's being set. So I don't know, but
Yeah,
I would
anyway,
check out your params and see if you see anything funky there. But here, just to see an example of this has many belongs to relationship, I can do C equals cohort.first. And so this is my cohort. And again, this is cohort with an ID of 1. And if I come back here, you can see I've got this cohort with ID of 1. And then I can also run, so in this case, C is the cohort, C dot users, and it gives me this, which is all of the users that are associated with this cohort. And again, if I look down through here, if I look for cohort underscore ID, let's see here. So notice, see, I'm seeing cohort with ID of 1 here.
yeah,
So that's sort of the way Rails does it. I mean, it's not real straightforward, and you've got 2 or 3 places you have to sort of link up for this. So like, for instance, in this case, to create this association and to create this view, you know, I've got the has many belongs to relationship that's inside the model. I've got a route that I've got associated with it. And then the other thing is, I guess we should look at the view. So this is the users, users.html. Yeah, so inside, so this is inside, if you can see that path, this is inside app views cohorts along with the users action here. I've also got this users view, and essentially this is a copy. I mean, all I did was copy the index view from the users index view, and then made some slight tweaks to it. But essentially it's the same view. Right. Essentially, it's the same view that's there. I added this cohort name here, but other than that, most of this is, you know, is the exact same thing that's inside the index view. So powerful to do, but you know, Rails has a sort of this kind of, you know, once you warm up to the conventional way and the sort of the way that they do it, it comes fairly quickly, as opposed to, again, I just, not to bash JavaScript frameworks or Node or anything like that, but with those things, you sort of have to come up with all this yourself, which is, you know, there's a certain power in that and there's a certain flexibility in it, but I just want something that works and is somewhat standardized, so I could pass this on to you, Greg, and you could, you know, yeah, you might have to Google about a bit, even though you're new to Rails, you might have to Google about a little bit, but you could figure it out fairly quickly, as opposed to if I came up with sort of roll my own stuff in JavaScript, it would take you, I would argue, a significantly longer amount of time to sort of figure out what was going on. Okay, that's all I have on HTTP REST and CRUD. Any questions on that? I mean, it's all, again, it's yeah, I mean, it's straightforward, but then it's not. I mean, right? It's like, you know, it's good to know about it, and it's one of those things you'll continue to see. So, like, I mean, you know, don't stress about it, but also don't, like, it's not going anywhere. You will have to, you know, you will need to understand. If you go on to do great things or more things in software development, you're going to have to warm up to it more. So don't, you know, don't stress about it and feel like you have to know it all now. But at the same time, you know, is when you get a chance to do some reading on it, or if you're at a conference and somebody's giving a talk on it, it's just good to constantly update that in your mind, because it's part of this bigger sort of system of web development and how the web works. So the more you can understand about it, the better. Okay. let's do this. As I said, I think I'm at minimum viable product standard. So let's maybe walk through. Let's walk through the user stories and the requirements. Well, let's just start up top here and let's walk through the requirements that we set up for our Vetsu Code app. And like I said, I think I feel like I'm there. The next step is I've got that on the list this week, is to push it to Heroku, just so it's there and I can give it a play. That it can be live, where Eddie and others who want to look at it can and give me some feedback on it.
If we want it out.
Yeah, if we want to deploy it someplace else at some point, then that's fine. Okay, so let's walk through it here now. So I'm going to sign up. So again, I'm just looking at our requirements here. So users or applicants will create an account and then they'll update their profile or profile pre-work found at /apply on the Vetsu Code app. So I'm going to sign up here and let me put a 2. I can't remember if I already used this name. And then test 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's my password at home. How'd you get it?
Oh, yeah. So again, this is what the registration email is going to look like. Thank you for registering for Vetsu Code. What now? Log into Recruit Tracker. Probably should hyperlink that. Go to your profile page, begin completing your profile based on the work. Should probably hyperlink that. Track and update your pre-work and /profile. When your pre-work is complete and ready for review, click the Submit for Review button in your profile. Someone from Vetsu Code will review your pre-work, provide feedback via email, or you will be accepted to the program. After being accepted, more info will be provided via email or phone. So that's what that looks like. Let's close this. Let's go back here. So we will sign in now, log in. Probably should log the user in when they sign up the first time, but maybe we'll get to that. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so they go to /profile. They can update their stuff here. Probably have this edit should probably be more prominent so they can see that. They can add more stuff here. Army. So update that. Okay, see that this is the problem right here. I don't know, it's something, I wasn't having this issue at one point, and then I changed something, and now anytime I try to update the user, well, and the fix is, I've sort of been doing a workaround, is rather than doing, so this is the user's controller.
So that's that regex is catching.
Well,
but it's just
yeah,
late,
maybe,
right?
yeah, the validation, maybe that the validation is, but it shouldn't. I mean, if I do update attribute, the workaround has been doing update attribute rather than using save, but you really shouldn't have to do that. I mean, update, yeah, because in fact, yeah, if we look in the console, oh no, actually this is not an issue, or maybe it's not this password. Well, I don't know, maybe it is, because yeah, we got the password validation here, there's an issue, but also GitHub username, pre-work ID. So that needs to be fixed, but let's see, unpermitted parameters. This is on the users. GitHub user _. Okay. Yeah, we must have changed that at some point because it's GitHub profile URL. So anyway, I'll update those. So that's something that needs to be fixed. Let's see if to submit. So the idea here, well, let's go back to before we jump ahead of ourselves. So that email notifications, actually this needs to be updated to the way, and this is, I mean, some of this is for your benefit too, Greg, just so like if somebody asks or they have issues with it, is the user mailer. I'm just hard coding the admin's email here until we figure out where we want it. I mean, if I get to it before I deploy it,
Yeah.
it's fine. But I mean, ideally, I guess we'd have somewhere in the app on the admin side where we would set. I mean, the other thing is we got a couple options. We could just email and copy all admins in the system on all the status changes and updates, but I don't think we want to do that because I could see, you know, if the mentors are in there and they're marked as admins and Jerome is in there and other people, that they're not going to want to get all that email. So so ideally we just would have somewhere in the app where you could set, you know, we'd have a UI interface that allow you to set a recruit manager or something like that. But
almost like an opt-in.
Yeah, for right now, well, I'm just going to hard code it inside the user mailer. But anyway, this email should go to both the applicant who signed up, and I'm thinking the admins are going to want to know, and people sign up to it. Just be nice for them to be able to see that. You know, if somebody on Facebook, I don't know how they're using Facebook, but I know a lot of the initial communication starts on Facebook. So, you know, if Eddie's had a conversation with somebody there and then he gets the email that they've signed up for the app, and he sort of knows that happened. So email notifications, user creates an account, and then when the applicant has completed all required work, they can formally submit their application, and an email is sent to the pre-work manager. Recruitive status is set to submitted. So you make sure this, when your pre-work is complete and ready for review, click the submit for review. And yeah, that says submit for review. So right now their status is applied. Ideally, the idea is they're going to go in here and edit all this information, and when they think it's ready to go, they'll hit submit for review. So your status has changed. So here you can see, okay, I see what happened. Interesting. This should say the recruit's email address and the admins, but it's two admins, but I'm actually using @user, the current user who's logged in. So that's why it happens to be that. That's why we're seeing two emails. Right. But anyway, it's fine. So this is the email that's going to go out if we want to add more stuff, but this is just the sort of bare bones. Hi, John 2, which is the first name, your profile status and recruit tracker is changed to, and then this would be whatever it's changed to. And then I've just got here, contact your VWC liaison if you have questions. There may be some more information we'll want to put in there, but anyway, that's what the email looks like. Recruit status set by pre-work manager. So ideally this is all the recruit side of it. So let's log in as an admin now. Admin at test.com and no. All right, so this is the admin side. So the idea here is we could go to current recruits. Here's our current recruit for summer 2021. He could edit, if he needs to edit any of this information, he could. But if he just wants to review.
Yeah, and you're looking for you're looking from the view of the admin who's reviewing the submitted information.
This would be the admin view here, and ideally you've got a dozen or so, or I don't know how many, a couple dozen folks that are going to apply for a given cohort. Again, we can change this information. Again, I'm just sort of going to leave the basics there now until Eddie goes in and reviews it and gives them some feedback. But you know, to me, their login information, name, and that stuff, and then what their current status is. Obviously, he's looking for the submitted status. I'm assuming is the ones that he's going to want to review. So this has been submitted. He reviews the information. Let's say, no, you don't quite have it. It needs more work. Now, what I'm considering is, and I think we talked about this, Greg, is having a text box here where they could include, they could append to the default email. So, because idea, if it needs more work, well, where does it need more work at? So I think you're going to need the ability to, on the fly, when you change status, needs more work, rejected, he may say, hey, you're not, you know, we're not going to let you in because of this, that, and the other. But you sort of need the ability to add more information to the default email notification that the recruit gets. So the plan is to put a text box here, and they can enter whatever they want. And when they hit change status, so like right now, we'll change to needs more work, change status. So this is the email that goes out Yeah, this is not the 2 is what's messing me up here, and that's yeah, I'll have to look at that. That's not right, because the recruits email should also be here, not my email twice. But anyway, hi John 2, your profile status recruit trackers changed to needs more work. We'll probably make that a little more human readable rather than that. That's the actual database field, or the enum value that's associated with needs more work. But again, the idea in this email is when they'd set it, when that free form text box they've got, they could put whatever text they want in there, and that email would be appended to this default email here. Okay. Then here's all our statuses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I think all those are covered. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, yeah, it's okay. Email notification when the status has changed, that's okay. Maybe a text area with pre-work manager can enter custom message. That's still needs to be done. Cohort should be set for each round of applicants. So that's in case now. That's in place now. Again, I signed up for this summer 2021 cohort that I created last. I just signed up. When I signed up as this user, they were automatically assigned to that cohort. So any new users or new recruits that sign up automatically get set to the active cohort. So that seems to be in place and working. Cohort dates, application deadline. I don't think I've set anything with that. I need to, that's one of the things Eddie should review. And if he says he needs that, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the major user of this needs to.
Yeah, right. Because I don't want to go in and creating a bunch of sophisticated features that he may not. He just
we're not at that
shrugs
bridge
at it. That doesn't need. Yeah. Other items to track: phone call made, add to Slack, add GitHub organization, private notes. So that those are all things to come. I mean, those are all things we can even like, hey, just as a learning exercise, maybe if it's a new feature like that, we can go in and add it. And if it gets used, fine. If not, then, fine.
Yeah.
List of mentors, associate students with mentors, email alerts, troop progress. Again, those are all, I mean, the email alerts are in place, so we're okay.
Yeah,
there.
I think you can take the email alerts out of that.
Yeah, the other stuff is, like I say, if we want to.
Well, even the troop progress. I mean, the idea there is you were looking at going through each of those 5 steps to application.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I was thinking some,
the context of that.
Yeah, I was thinking some logging would be nice. So for instance, show change status, this status may change 2, 3, 4 times, right? It may go needs more work, and then they change and submit it back. And I don't know, it might be cool to be able to at the bottom here, see what the history, have a profile history or something like that. And you could, you just see a profile status and a date, and you could just sort of see a timeline. I mean, it'd be interesting more than anything else. But so that may be something, that we need a profile status logging table for that every time the profile status changes, in addition to doing everything we're doing now, email notification, changing the status. You quickly log that activity to a database somewhere. And then when you go back to this view and view it, you just pull the information associated with the profile, change information associated with user with an ID of 3, and just drop it on the page. So that's something we could do. Okay, and then let's go through these user stories real quick. Recruits apply, so they sign up for the account. We did that, receive a welcome email, follow instructions. Yep, that all seems okay. Admin reviews, asks Vetsu Code members sign up for the app. Mark or Greg will make them admins. Again, that's just using the console. When they initially sign up, they'll have to ask us. They'll need to let us know when they sign up, and then we can make them just change their admin flag. By the way, I updated the admin flag, so or changed it to a flag. It's not a role now; it's a Boolean field. So I think that's just a bit better way to do it. slash users the current recruits and should only show recruits in the current cohort and their status. It does, we're okay there. Admin will review recruits' profiles and change status accordingly, and also send appropriate emails. It does sort of, the appropriate emails is still, I need to do some debugging there. Create cohort interface where you can add cohorts. Any user who signs up gets assigned to the current default cohort. Admin has the ability to change cohort assignment. And we, I don't know about admin has the ability to change cohort assignment. Yeah, I don't have that in yet. We did go through the process of creating a new cohort and setting it to the default, and then we created a new user, and that user got associated with the cohort, so that works. But now we don't have the we don't have the ability to change a user's cohort, so that's something that's could be in to-do status still. Cohort table includes name, start and end date, description, primary instructor. Didn't add primary instructor. I mean, we've got notes fields. I was thinking about that. Cohort. I don't know. Can I update a cohort? Let's see. Summer cohort. Primary instructor. Maybe Sergeant Rock. Update. Yep.
There he is, old Sergeant Rock.
See that's actually that's a bug too, technically, because the validation I've got. Yeah, the validation I've got looks for any active cohort. It needs to, include. Okay, I see what's going on. Anyway, that's something I'll have to. That's something I'll need to figure out. Let's see. Cohort has many users, belongs to one cohort. Yep, that's okay. Create a view for past cohorts and recruits. Yep, that's okay, because we can go to cohorts. We can, the noobs cohort had these guys in it, John Doe and Mary, and then summer 2021 just has John too. Okay, so we're 80% of the way there. All righty.
Yeah, this has been fun too.
That worked out perfect on time. Questions about anything?
No, looks good.
Yeah, well, so like I say, I'll let you know. I'll probably have you pull down. I've updated the README and I've got the seeds file working. So getting it going, maybe at some point I'll ping you maybe and have you do a fresh pull, and then maybe have you run the seed file and just make sure you can log in. I mean, the initial seed file. C.RB. Yeah, just creates a single cohort. And then by default, these, when I create these users after that, it'll associate these users with that single cohort. But anyway, it's enough to get you going. You know what I'm saying? And you've got an admin user you can log in as, and you've got a recruit that you can log in as. And admin user has admin set to true. The other user does not. And so I just need some of the things I went through today. I just finding the little bugs there, get those fixed. And then, I'm hoping by the end of the week, let's see, today's Wednesday. Yeah, maybe by the end of the week, probably more like the middle of next week, actually have it pushed to Heroku, and then we can share it with Eddie and Jerome and folks and see what they think.
Yeah, very cool.
Okay. All right, man, that's it. We'll do, let's see, I think the last LinkedIn Learning section is controllers. Let me look real quick. I think that's the last one. So let's see, CRUD REST. Yeah, we did CRUD REST and resourceful routes, and then controllers and CRUD is the last one, and it's okay. It's a fairly long. That's a fairly long section. It's a fairly long section, quite a few videos. So maybe we'll break those. Maybe we'll break it up into 2 learning sessions. And once we're through that, I think we'll wrap things up.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. If you have any questions or anything, just ping me in Slack.
Sure will.
All right, man.
Thanks, Mark.
See ya.
Good to see you.
All right, bye.